Alright, I'm halfway through sanding the top. Now I'm just doing my first sort of stint of sanding with a 40 grit sheet. I'm going to go over it once I've completed the whole top with an 80 and then a 120. So here's what it looks like with just the 40. It's a little bit patchy and a little bit rough, so we'll smooth all that out when we get to the next sort of round. So I'm going to go ahead and sand the underneath of this shelf because I'm going to keep the middle shelf natural and finish doing around the edges here. As you can see here, I've taken off all the hardware now, so it's ready to start prepping for paint. So I'm going to give it a good wipe over. As you can see, there's dust everywhere, so I've got to get that all off. And we're going to tape up the edges so that we don't get anything on our nicely sanded wood. And then we're ready for our base coat. Now I have left a couple of bits of hardware on because I'm just going to paint over them. Much easier to just leave them on there than take it all off. The piece is all wiped down and ready for the base coat. But before we go ahead and do that, we're going to pop over and work on the doors. So we'll get them ready and do everything all at once. Now with the doors, I'm going to create a new backing for it. So I've just got a thin bit of chipboard and I'm going to trace around the space here. I'm going to leave an extra centimetre so that I can nail it onto the back of the doors, and we'll go from there. To make sure I got the right size, I literally just placed the frames onto the chipboard and traced around the inside edge. That gives me the perfect size that I need to cut out. So I've got a couple of different types of paintable wallpaper here, so I'm just having a look through to see which one I want to use, and then once I decide on a pattern, I'm going to cut that to size. So I've chosen my pattern. Now it's time to lay it out and cut to size. So now I'm just cutting the wallpaper to size. I've just traced around the inserts to get the exact size that I need, and we'll go from there. So they recommend to use a mix of 60% PVA and 40% water. So I've got that here ready to go, paintbrush, and all I'm going to do is whack on the glue, stick on the wallpaper, and then I'm going to put some weights on it and let it dry overnight for the next 24 hours. And tomorrow we can start all of our painting. So I've got it on there. I'll show you once it's dry how we get all the wrinkles out. But for now I'm going to pop this one aside and put some weights on it so that it can dry nice and flat. So there we have it. I've got my two doors glued and wallpapered, and they're just sitting there with those weights on it, as you can see on my paint containers, and they are going to sit there until tomorrow, so make sure they're nice and firmly glued on there. So they actually dried really nice and flat, so I don't need to do anything further with them other than attach them to the door frames. So I've just got some small little kind of tack nails which I am going to put in there. So you just got to make sure obviously your nail is not going to go through the width of the door, which these won't. So I'm going to go ahead now and adhere the backing to the doors. So I've finished one door here. So as you can see, it's got the beautiful ruffled effect coming through from the back. And I've just used those nails and adhered it to the back. Now this is all going to get painted, so it doesn't have to look super beautiful or anything like that. You won't see it. Alright, so both doors are done. They're all put together now. So we can get painting on the whole piece. I've got all the little bits that we needed to do done. I'm just going to tape off the whole cabinet and we'll put the doors on. First you want to tape off the areas you don't want to paint. So I'm just using this tape here and some paper towel. And then here is the base coat. It's Zambuca in the Canterbury Blue. Now I've chosen the black as my base coat because I'm going to distress this piece, and so the top coat will be white. And by distress, I mean sanding around the edges. And when you do this, the base color is going to show through. So I want the black to show through underneath the white and give it that aged look. So that's why we are going with black first. You can do any color, but I find the black looks really nice. So you'll see that when we get to the end product. Alright, we have our first layer of paint on there. Now we've just gone with the black base coat, as I said. I might go over the edges just with another layer of the black just to make it extra strong, because I am going to be distressing and I want the black to be shining through. So it looks pretty good now. I'm going to move on to the doors and the shelving next up. Alright, now time to paint the doors. I am only going to go lightly over this paintable wallpaper because I'm going to use some black wax on it, and that's going to get caught in the detail here and essentially be my distressed look. But I will go around to the edges and just a light brush over the paper. Alright, and lastly, I've just got the shelves to paint. So I'm just doing one side at a time and letting it dry, and then I'll flip it over once it is fully dry to do the other side so that it looks neat and it doesn't look all messy. But as you can see, there's the doors that I've painted and just dry brushed a little on that paintable wallpaper. It will all be white and you'll see the end product when we get there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and paint these guys. Alright, so I finished painting all the shelves and now I just have to wait for everything to dry before we can move on. Alright, so my paint is all nice and dry now. So I'm going to go ahead with the top coats. For this piece, I'm going to go white just to match our decor that we already have in our house. I am using the Rust-Oleum chalked paint in the linen white. You can't really see because I've dribbled paint everywhere, but that's what we're going to do. Probably do 2 or 3 coats over the top to get a nice full coverage, and then we're going to do some distressing. So let's get going on our white paint. My base coat is all dry, so I'm going ahead now with my main colour. I've started from the outside and worked my way in. Now it's just your first coat. You're going to see your brush strokes and it's going to look very streaky. But don't worry, once you get to your second and third coats, that will start to disappear and it will look really nice. So hopefully you can see my brush strokes. Look, it's thin layer, but I've got them all coming the one way. So get your coverage done, then dampen your brush, get some water on it, and just make it all the same direction and it will dry. And when you do your second and third coat, it will look much nicer. All right, now I'm going to paint my top coat on the shelves and the drawers. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my second and third coats of paint. I'm sure you don't want to watch me do all that. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and paint my final coat of white on all the doors and the unit itself. Now I'm using Canterbury Blue in the fresh white. I was using Rust-Oleum in the linen white, and I ran out on my first coat. I went to Bunnings to go get some more paint, and it had completely sold out. And a couple of weeks later, still no more paint. So I love the Canterbury Blue. Fresh white will be almost what I had anyway. And look, it's totally fine to mix coats. That's what I'm doing. It's what you got to do sometimes. So you'll see what that looks like when it's all done. So here's the piece with all the white finished, and it's all dry and ready to go. So I am going to go and distress the piece next up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and distress the cabinet to the look that I want. I am using these Uni Pro flexible sanding pads. I find these give it a nice smooth finish. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so I'm just picking out some areas that I want to poke through and accentuate, so you can see there. I'm actually using a 120 grit piece just in the sections I'm really trying to get through to the black, and then going over it with the fine sandpaper sponge just to smooth everything out. So that's the second one. This is one I've done already. So I've got a couple of bits highlighted there, so we'll see what it looks like all together. These are the two doors, so I'm just going to leave it at that for now, and we'll go ahead with the rest of the cabinet. Alright, so I've gone around the whole piece and distressed where I wanted the black to show through that we originally painted. Now I've really just focused on the bits that will be visible when the doors are closed and it's all in the room. So it's looking quite beautiful. Alright, so time to put the doors back on. Alright, so I've distressed the whole piece, and I've just put the doors back on just to have a look at what she looks like. I haven't put the handles on as yet because I am going to still need to seal the piece, and I'm just going to use some Cabot's Clear for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and stain the top and the middle shelf. Alright, so I am now going to coat everything with some clear coat. I am using the Cabot's Clear, and I'm just going to go all over once, and then on the shelves and the high wear areas I'm going to give them a couple extra coats for some extra protection. Alright, so everything's ready to go, and I am up to staining. So I've got my stain here. It's the Cabot's Stain and Varnish in the Walnut Satin. I've just emptied the stain into one of these paint trays, and I'm using a sponge brush applicator. I find it's the easiest way to apply stain. It comes on nice and smooth, nice and even, and they have a nice tapered edge, which is really great because I need it to get into the edges when I'm doing this shelf. So I've already done the underside. I flipped it over and I've done that, and I'm going to go ahead and do the top and the shelf. Now I just want to show you how easy it is with the sponge brush. I'm just recording and videoing, so it's a little bit challenging, but just look at that, nice and smooth, nice and easy. And you just want to do long strokes all the way up your piece until you've got the coverage that you want. Now this is the top, so I'm going to do a few, I think I'm going to do about 3 coats of this just to make sure it's extra durable when it's actually got things on top of it. So I'm going to continue on and do the whole piece. Okay, so my first coat of stain is on, looking nice and smooth. And just make sure you check all the edges and wipe off any drips because they will dry like that and they won't look good. So I've done all the shells. I'm going to do a couple of coats of this, so just a light sand in between, and then a second and third coat will go on top. Now I put the handles on there just to see what it looks like all together, and they just look so perfect with this piece. They're stained pretty much the same color as the top, which is why I picked them, because it would just look so good. So again, I'm just waiting for the first coat of stain to dry, then we'll put the second and third coat on, a bit of wax, and she's done. Alright, second coat is on, so just got to leave that to dry now, and we'll do our final coat. Now time to wax my piece. I'm using some of the Gillies Carnauba polish in the finishing wax, and I'm also going to use a bit of the Fierce Watson's black wax. Now I'm just using an old sock to apply, and then I've also got a small brush that I've cut the ends off, which I will use to dab on the black wax as well. Okay, as you can see, I've put my black wax onto my paintable wallpaper. Now I did start in the corners and to see how that looked, and I didn't really like it, so then I thought I'd try spreading it out, and I didn't like that either. Now you can typically remove black wax by putting some of the just natural wax on top, but because there is so many grooves, it really just made it like more of a grey and just spread it out everywhere. So I do not like it. It doesn't look good. So what am I going to do from here, you might ask? Look, it all happens. We all try something thinking in our minds it looks good, and then when we do it, it just doesn't look good at all. But great news, guys. As long as you let the wax dry so that when you touch it, it doesn't feel tacky anymore, you can actually just chalk paint right over it. That's the beauty of chalk paint. So I'm going to go ahead, let it dry, and then I'm just going to go back over it with my white paint and leave it at that. Alright, so I've painted over the wax, and I'm just going to wait and let this dry. I might just leave it as one coat. I don't actually mind that there's a little hint of the black showing through, because I do have that on the rest of the piece. So I'm going to wait and see how that looks when it's dried before I decide whether or not I'm going to go ahead with the second coat. Piece is pretty much finished, but I am going to do a top coat of Cabot's Clear on the top and the shelf just for that little bit extra durability. So here it is here. That's what I'm using, the Cabot's Clear and a couple of sponge brushes to apply, just like I did with the stain.